I never expected a dead phone to speak again, especially not with a woman's trembling voice that seemed to know more about my daughter than I did. It happened on a cold Thursday night, inside a nearly empty city bus, grinding its way through Harbour District at 11:47 p.m., when the streetlights flickered like tired stars and the rain pressed itself against the windows in thin silver lines. Ethan Harley sat alone near the back, uniform still dusty from the late shift at the warehouse, boots heavy, mind heavier. His 8-year-old daughter, Lily, was sleeping at home with the neighbor, again because life had turned him into a man who worked when other fathers got to exist. He pulled the old cracked phone out only because his new one had died, and for a moment, the soft blue glow of the outdated screen felt like holding a relic from a past that hadn't been kind. The bus jolted over a pothole, and the phone buzzed weakly in his hand. A single notification blinked. One new voice message. The timestamp read 3 years ago, November 14th, 10:03 a.m. The same week, Lily stopped talking, for almost 2 months after her mother left. Ethan frowned, thumb hovering. He didn't remember saving anything from that time, didn't remember this phone ever recording someone's voice he didn't know. But when he pressed play, the bus seemed to fall into a hush. "Ethan, I don't know if you'll ever hear this," a woman whispered, her voice thick with fear, with apology, with something else he couldn't name. "But I saw Lily that day. I saw what she picked up. I know what it means. Please don't let her carry this alone." Ethan straightened, heartbeat stumbling. The message cut out abruptly, leaving the murmur of engine noise crawling back into his ears like an unwelcome intruder. He replayed it once, twice, 3 times, trying to anchor himself in the present. But the tone of her voice, it wasn't a stranger's. It felt like someone who had stood close enough to feel Lily's breath. Someone who had watched something unfold that Ethan wasn't even aware had happened. By the time he got off the bus and walked the final block home, drenched and trembling, the message had burrowed deep under his ribs. It was nearly midnight when he slipped quietly into the small apartment and checked on Lily, curled around her stuffed bear, breathing softly into her pillow. For a moment, he brushed a stray curl away from her forehead. She stirred but didn't wake. Ethan whispered, "What did you carry? And who knew before me?" Sleep didn't come that night. Instead, he lay on the fraying couch, replaying the message until the edges of the woman's words felt branded into his skin. By morning, the world had settled into a cold gray, and life demanded movement breakfast. School drop-off, a rushed goodbye, a quick kiss on Lily's hair, and then the warehouse floor where forklifts hummed like tired beasts. Ethan tried to focus, but every corner of his mind kept circling back to that voice. By noon, he couldn't take it anymore. During a break, he tried calling the number the message had come from. "This number is no longer in service," an automated voice replied. Again and again, the same answer. The warehouse foreman barked orders, while Ethan stared at the disconnected line as if sheer will could pull a voice out of silence. When his shift ended, he walked straight to Lily's school. She ran to him, arms swinging, smile bright, but he felt a tightening in his chest as he watched him, observing the innocence, the softness, the small shadows behind her eyes that only a parent sees. On the walk home, he asked gently, "Lily, when you were 5, back when Mummy left, did something happen? Something you didn't tell me?" She paused, looking up at him with confusion, then shook her head. "I don't remember much." She squeezed his hand. "Just that you were sad." He tried to smile, but something in her tone wasn't certainty. It was fear disguised as forgetfulness. That night, after dinner and bedtime routines, when the apartment finally sank into silence, Ethan sat alone at the kitchen table, phone in hand. There had to be a way to trace the voice, to understand what Lily had been holding all these years. And then, as if summoned by the tension stitching itself through the room, his new phone vibrated. An email alert blinked, from unknown subject. About the voice message. Ethan's breath caught. He opened it. "Ethan, I didn't mean for the message to reach you now. I thought the phone was gone. I never wanted to reopen what happened. But we should talk. It's about your daughter. Meet me tomorrow at 7 a.m. in front of Ridgeway Hospital. Please, it's important." There was no name, no signature, but the tremor in the words matched the tremor in the voice from the message. Ethan stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Ridgeway Hospital, the place where Lily was born, the place where her mother walked out on them, the place Ethan swore he'd never step into again. The next morning the city was wrapped in a soft silver fog. Ethan left Lily with the neighbor before the sun was up and made his way toward the hospital, every step dragging him deeper into a past he didn't want to revisit. The parking lot was nearly empty, the lights humming softly overhead. He shoved his hands into his jacket pockets, breath clouding in front of him. At exactly 7:03 a.m., a woman emerged from behind the sliding glass doors, tall, dark coat, shoulders tense, eyes sharp but tired, as if she hadn't slept in a long time. He recognized her instantly, though they had spoken only once in passing at his warehouse a month ago, when a corporate audit had brought up a management storming through the building with clipboards and cold stares. Her name was Claire Rowan, the new operations executives, the one that everyone called the Iron Manager, the woman with impossible expectations and no patience for excuses. She had barely looked at him during the inspection, had barely looked at anyone. Yet here she was, standing in front of him at dawn, her breath shaky, her fingers twisting around the strap of her purse. "Mr. Hale," she began, voice softer than he expected, almost unrecognizable from her usual clipped tone. "Thank you for coming." Ethan blinked, stunned. "You're the one who sent the message." She nodded, eyes flickering down. "And the woman in the recording." His chest tightened. "How do you know my daughter? How could you know something about her that I don't?" Claire inhaled, slow and trembling. "Because I was there the day everything happened, and because your daughter saw something she never should have seen." The fog around them thickened, swallowing the edges of the morning. Ethan took a step closer, voice low, controlled only by fear. "Tell me, what did she see?" Claire closed her eyes as if steadying herself against a memory too heavy to lift. "She saw me, and she saw the truth I'd been running from for 8 years. When she opened her eyes again, Ethan could see it clearly beneath the composed executive exterior. Beneath the icy reputation, there was a woman breaking at the seams, carrying a secret that had lived in the shadows far too long. And somehow, Lily had been the only witness. For a moment, Ethan couldn't breathe. Claire's words hung between them like fragile glass, shimmering, dangerous, ready to shatter with a single touch. The hospital doors slid open behind her, letting out a soft hiss and a gust of sterile air that carried faint echoes of footsteps, beeping monitors, and old memories Ethan had spent years trying to bury. Claire kept her gaze fixed on the ground, as if afraid that looking directly at him would make her confession real too soon. When she finally lifted her eyes, they were wet, not with fresh tears, but with the ones she had refused to let fall for years. "It was the day your daughter's mother left," she began, voice thin, trembling at the edges. "November 14th. I was working here back then, before I ever stepped into the corporate world. I wasn't the woman you know today." She swallowed, the movement tight. "I was a social worker in the pediatric wing." Ethan's heartbeat stumbled. "You?" She nodded. I handled cases where children witnessed things they couldn't process. Children who needed someone neutral to talk to. Someone safe. Her eyes softened for the first time. Your daughter, Lily. She wandered out of the waiting room and into the hallway near the east stairs. I saw her holding something. A little white card with a drawing on it. I didn't think much of it at first, until she told me where she found it. Ethan felt the world tilt slightly, as if gravity had loosened its grip around him. His daughter had never spoken about that day. He'd never pressed, too afraid she'd relive the moment her mother vanished like a shadow dissolving in daylight. What was on the card? Claire's breath caught. A symbol. The kind a child shouldn't recognize. But she did. She traced it with her finger and said, "Mummy dropped it when she was crying." Her voice cracked on the last word. I knew immediately what it meant. And I knew Lily had seen something she shouldn't have. Ethan's chest burned. He felt the cold morning seep farther into his bones. What symbol was it? She hesitated, then pulled something from her coat, a folded piece of paper. Worn, edges frayed, as if it had lived in her pocket for years. She handed it to him. Ethan unfolded it slowly. Inside was a quick, shaky sketch of a small spiral intersected by two lines, a symbol that carried a strange familiarity, like something seen in a fleeting dream. "Your daughter's drawing," Claire whispered. "She gave it to me. She said it was the same as the one on the card your wife dropped before she ran." Ethan stared at the drawing, fingers trembling. Why would she have this? What does it mean? Claire exhaled deeply, and for the first time he saw her vulnerability, clearly raw, unarmored. "It's a recovery group, Mark. A private one. Not exactly legal, not exactly safe. It's tied to a clinic that used to operate in the basement of this hospital. Off the books, they offered experimental detoxes, quick cures, dangerous ones. Your wife was in one of those programs." She looked away, guilt settling heavily on her shoulders. "And I was the one who processed her intake. The day she left you too, she was relapsing, panicked, confused. She shouldn't have been discharged, but the program director pushed it through." Ethan felt the ground disappear beneath him. For years, he had pictured that day as abandonment, maybe even betrayal. Now it twisted into something else, something darker, more fractured, more broken. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" he whispered. "Because the program shut down 3 days later," Claire said. "There were investigations, complaints, people went missing, records were destroyed. I tried to report it, but I was young, powerless, and terrified. And then, 1 week after everything collapsed, I saw your daughter again." The air tightened. She was standing outside the old stairwell door, alone, holding that card. She wasn't crying, she wasn't afraid, she just looked, lost. Claire's voice softened, warmed by memory. "When I knelt beside her and asked where her mummy went, she pointed down the stairwell and said she went that way. But she said not to follow." Claire paused, closing her eyes briefly. "Ethan, your wife didn't walk out the front door. She went into the basement." He felt his legs weaken. The hospital suddenly loomed around him, every window reflecting the ghosts of unanswered questions. "Are you telling me she might still be?" "No," Claire said gently, shaking her head. "The clinic cleared out. Whatever happened down there, it ended that day. But your daughter saw the last moments before your wife disappeared from your life. And she carried that secret, alone, for years." A quiet, dull ache spread through Ethan's chest, almost suffocating. "She was only 5, he whispered. "I know," Claire murmured. "And she shouldn't have carried that alone. That's why I tried to reach you. That's why I left the message." Her shoulders drooped. "But I panicked. I thought I had no right. I thought reopening the pain would only hurt you both. And now?" Ethan asked. Claire took a step toward him, closer than she had been before. Her presence felt different now, no longer cold or distant, like the executive who walked the warehouse with clipped authority. She looked human, fragile, haunted. Now I know Lily needs closure, and so do you. The morning light shifted, the fog thinning into pale gold ribbons. Ethan looked down at the drawing again. His daughter's small hand, her silent burden, the symbol, the truth. It hit him all at once. He had been protecting Lily from a wound he didn't understand, while she had been protecting him from one she remembered too clearly. "What do you want me to do?" he asked, voice soft. Claire hesitated. "Come with me. There's something you need to see." She nodded toward the entrance. The old basement is sealed, but the security office still has archived footage from the last day the clinic operated. Most of it was erased, but not all. A shiver ran through him. "You've seen it?" She nodded, eyes dimming. "Once, years ago. It broke something in me, but it also made me realize." Her voice drifted. "Your wife didn't leave you because she stopped loving you. She left because she thought disappearing was the only way to keep you both safe." Something heavy cracked inside him, releasing a rush of grief he had never allowed himself to feel. He steadied himself with a slow breath. "Show me." Claire turned, leading him inside. As they walked through the quiet corridors, Ethan noticed how she kept glancing at him, not in the cold, evaluating way she had surveyed employees at the warehouse, but in a way that carried a strange mix of apology and responsibility, as if she were walking beside the consequences of her own silence. They reached the security office, small, dimly lit, walls lined with monitors showing real-time footage of hallways, waiting rooms, entrances. An older guard greeted them with a confused frown, but Claire's old badge, kept all these years, granted them access to the archives. She scrolled through folders until she found a single labeled file. "November 14th, she whispered. The footage flickered onto the screen, grainy, black and white. Ethan felt his breath hitch as he recognized the hallway. And then he saw a small figure, tiny, curly-haired Lily, standing at the bottom of the frame, clutching a small card. Her eyes were wide, searching, listening. His chest tightened, and then a shadow moved behind her. Claire took a slow breath. This is the moment she saw something she's never spoken about, something only she and I knew existed, until you heard that message. Ethan leaned closer, heart hammering as he watched the scene that had lived only in Lily's silence and Claire's. Guilt unfold for the first time before his eyes. The video frame quivered slightly, as if time itself were trembling with the weight of what it was about to reveal. Ethan leaned closer, his breath shallow, one hand instinctively gripping the edge of the desk. Claire stood beside him, her arms wrapped around herself, eyes fixed on the screen with a mix of dread and resignation. The tiny black and white figure of Lily stood at the center of the frame, small, curly-haired, fragile, but steady in a way no child should ever have to be. Then, from the far end of the corridor, a woman staggered into view. Ethan's heart seized. It was her. Even in grainy footage, even through the distortions of time and low-resolution surveillance, he recognized her posture, her movements, the way she held her hands near her chest, as if trying to protect something deep inside. His wife, Mary, looked thinner than he remembered, gaunt even, her hair pulled back messily, her eyes darting around in a wild, frightened rhythm. Another figure appeared behind her, a man in a lab coat, his face shadowed. He grabbed her arm, not harshly, but with an urgency that made Ethan's stomach twist. Mara pulled away, pressing her back against the wall. She held something small in her hand, a card, the same one Lily must have found. She seemed to whisper something to the man, shaking her head over and over, and then she looked down the hall, toward the stairwell, toward where Lily stood. In the footage, Lily didn't run. She simply watched, frozen, as if her small heart knew this moment would carve itself into her forever. Then Mara did something unexpected, something that made Ethan's breath break inside his throat. She smiled, not a calm smile, not a happy one, but a tragic, fierce, protective smile, the kind a mother makes when everything inside her is falling apart, but she refuses to let her child see it. Mara knelt down briefly, out of frame, and when she stood again, the card was no longer in her hand. She dropped it for Lily, Claire whispered, almost as if she wanted someone to understand. On the screen, Mara stood upright, wiped her face, and then turned toward the basement stairwell door. She looked back only once, a fleeting glance, framed in shadows, before disappearing into the darkness below. The man in the lab coat followed her in a rush, and a moment later, the door slammed shut. The footage flickered, then cut to static. Ethan watched the blank screen in silence, unable to move. He didn't know how long he sat there, hands trembling, vision swimming as everything he thought he knew about that day unraveled. Mara hadn't walked away from them. She had run towards something, maybe danger, maybe a final solution, maybe a sacrifice he had never understood. She wasn't abandoning you, Claire said softly. She was running from the clinic. They pressured her to enter a final procedure, something she didn't want. When she realized they wouldn't let her leave, she made her own escape. But she didn't want Lily to follow. Ethan covered his face with both hands, feeling the weight of years collapse over him. All this time, he murmured, voice strangled, I thought she'd left us. I thought she didn't want us. Claire stepped closer, hesitating before speaking, her voice fragile with sincerity. Your wife was terrified, Ethan, but she loved that little girl more than her own heartbeat. You saw it in the footage. She wasn't running from you. She was trying to save you both. A long, aching silence filled the room. Ethan stared again at the still image on the monitor, the last frame captured before the footage ended. Mara, stepping through the door, the light catching her face for a fraction of a second. A mixture of fear, regret, and something gentle beneath it all. The kind of expression a person wears when they're choosing loss for the sake of love. He sank slowly into the chair, his breath shaky. How did Lily cope with this? He asked. How did she keep it inside all these years? Claire lowered her gaze. Children do that. They protect the adults they love, sometimes better than we protect them. She hesitated. After that day, Lily wouldn't speak to anyone. The doctor said it was trauma shock, that she needed time. And I think she was waiting for you to heal before she showed her own wounds. Ethan's eyes burned. I didn't even know she had them. You were grieving, Claire whispered. You were trying to survive. You did the best you could. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, trying to steady himself. If you knew all this, why didn't you come to me earlier? The question pained her. He could see it in the way her shoulders tightened, her throat bobbed, her fingers twisted nervously, because back then, I was a mess. After the clinic shut down, I lost everything. My job, my direction, my belief in the system I worked for. I couldn't face the families who had been affected. I blamed myself for what happened to her. She nodded toward the screen. I was the one who signed her intake papers. I was the one who let her walk out of my care. I doubted every choice I made. Ethan studied her carefully, seeing something he had missed in their brief interactions at the warehouse. Behind the distant, intimidating executive was a woman carrying her own unresolved ghosts. If he hadn't seen the footage just now, hadn't felt the truth clawing its way through him, he might not have understood the depth of her guilt. What changed? He asked, voice low. She met his eyes finally, allowing him to see how much she had been carrying. Your phone, she said simply. I didn't know you still had that old number saved in your contacts. When the system glitch forwarded the message to your new phone, I panicked. But then I realized maybe this was the only chance to set things right. She exhaled shakily. I couldn't let Lily grow up with a distorted version of her mother. I couldn't let you keep believing you'd been abandoned. Ethan looked at her differently now, the initial shock evolving into something quieter, deeper. Gratitude, pain, understanding. Thank you, he whispered, surprising himself with how much he meant it. Claire blinked, startled. You're thanking me for telling the truth, he said, even if it hurts. She swallowed, her eyes softening. You deserve the truth, Ethan. And so does Lily. They stayed there for a while longer, the silence between them no longer heavy or hostile, but shared like two people standing at the edge of the same wound, looking into the same darkness. When they finally turned away from the monitor, the world outside felt different, brighter in some places, sharper in others. As they walked through the corridor, Claire slowed, then stopped abruptly. There's something else you need to know. Ethan turned, heart tightening again. When I left the hospital years ago, I kept one file, she said. Just one. I didn't know why at the time. I think part of me hoped someday I'd find the right moment to return it to the right person. She reached into her purse and pulled out a thin envelope, yellowed with age. It belonged to your wife. Ethan stared at it. His throat tightened so much he could barely speak. What's inside? He asked, barely above a whisper. Claire placed the envelope gently in his hand. A letter, she said softly, addressed to you, signed. The morning she disappeared, Ethan froze. The envelope felt impossibly light, impossibly heavy, like the truth itself. For a long moment, Ethan couldn't move. The envelope rested in his hand like something alive, fragile, trembling, pulsing with a truth that had been waiting 80 years to breathe. His fingers brushed its surface, feeling the slight texture of the paper, the careful crease of the fold, the faint indentation where a pen had pressed a name, written in Mara's handwriting, the handwriting he used to recognize in grocery lists, in birthday cards she left taped to the fridge, in little notes she'd slip into his lunchbox back when life was simpler, safer, before storms were born inside her. He swallowed hard, unable to speak, unable to open it. Claire watched him with a quiet patience, not pushing, not stepping closer, simply anchoring the moment by being present. You don't have to read it now, she murmured, but it's yours, it always was. His voice cracked. Why did you keep it? A shadow crossed her expression, a memory she didn't want to touch but couldn't ignore. Because I didn't trust the system to give it to you, she said softly, and because some part of me hoped I'd find the courage to face my mistakes someday. You deserved this letter 8 years ago. I'm sorry it took me so long to bring it back to you. He breathed slowly, forcing air into lungs that felt too tight, too small. Thank you, he whispered. They left the security office and stepped back into the corridor, where the morning sun had finally begun to pierce through the fog outside, casting warm gold patches on the floor. It felt wrong, almost surreal. How normal the hospital suddenly looked, like a place where life began, not where his had been shattered. Claire walked beside him, not speaking, not rushing him, which was strange for a woman known for her relentless pace. She walked like someone who understood, like someone who knew that every step he took was inside a memory he didn't choose to revisit. At the entrance he stopped abruptly. I need a minute, he said. Claire nodded and stepped aside, giving him space without disappearing. Ethan moved toward a quiet corner near the window, overlooking the parking lot. He held the envelope with both hands, the way a man might hold a newborn, carefully, reverently, terrified of breaking it. He took a breath, another, and then he opened it. Inside was a single page. The ink faded in some places, smudged in others. The handwriting unmistakably Morris, slanted, graceful, always a little hurried. He read, Ethan, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it back upstairs. Please don't be angry with me. Please don't think I left because of you or Lily. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. I just couldn't tell you the truth without putting you both in danger." His heartbeat pounded in his ears. "I made a mistake joining this program. I thought it would fix everything I was fighting inside my head. I thought it would make me whole for you and for our daughter. But the deeper I went, the more I realized they weren't trying to help me. They were trying to own me. They told me I'd relapse without them. They told me I wasn't safe out there. They told me I'd hurt Lily without their supervision. I was scared. But when I saw her face this morning, everything became clear. I love her. I love you. And the only way to protect you both is to disappear before they use me to break us." Tears blurred the ink as he continued reading, breath uneven, chests tight. "Please tell her someday that I didn't leave because I stopped loving her. Tell her she saved me. Tell her she was the reason I found the courage to say no. Tell her she was the last beautiful thing I saw before I ran." Ethan's vision swam. "Take care of her, Ethan. She needs your strength more than she'll ever admit. And you. You deserve to live without my shadows haunting you. I'm sorry I couldn't become the woman you deserved, but I want you to know this. You love me, right? You love me deeply. And I never forgot that, not even in my darkest moments. If I don't come back, please forgive me. And please, please be happy someday, Mara." The letter slipped in his hands, and he pressed it to his chest, bending forward slightly as years of swallowed grief burst through every seam of his being. A low, broken sound escaped him, neither sob nor word, something raw, something he had never allowed himself to release. He didn't notice Claire stepping closer until she was near enough to hear his breathing shake, near enough to see the way his shoulders trembled beneath the weight of truth. She didn't touch him, didn't say anything at first. She simply stood beside him, her presence grounding him, giving him space to break without falling apart. After a long moment, when he finally wiped his eyes, she spoke gently. "She loved you," Claire whispered. "You can see it in every line." He nodded, unable to trust his voice. "And she trusted you with your daughter's whole world," Claire added. "That matters." He looked up at her, then really looked at her, and saw not the cold executive who made workers fear of her footsteps, but a woman who carried her own anchors of guilt, who was trying to make amends with a man she barely knew, simply because it was the right thing to do. For the first time, the barriers between them softened. Something fragile and human threaded the quiet space between them. Claire exhaled softly. "There's one more thing." Ethan straightened slightly. "She wasn't alone," Claire said. "The man who followed her into the stairwell. He wasn't chasing her. He was trying to help her escape. He was part of the investigation that shut the clinic down. She trusted him." Claire hesitated. "His name was Dr. Renford. He was the one who gave me the letter and told me to keep it safe until the right moment." Ethan felt the corners of his throat tighten again, but this time with something gentler. "So she did have someone watching over her." "Yes," Claire said softly. "And in a way, so did you." The weight of the letter in his hand felt different now, not just heavy with pain, but also with clarity. Mara hadn't vanished into nothingness. She had chosen a path he never understood because he never knew the truth. And Lily, sweet, quiet Lily, had carried the memory of that moment alone for so long. "I need to talk to her," Ethan said, voice steadier than he expected. "To Lily. She deserves to know. I can't let her carry this alone anymore." Claire nodded. "She's stronger than you think." "You both are." They walked out of the hospital together, the early afternoon sun breaking fully through the last remnants of the fog. The world outside felt changed, not because the truth healed everything, but because it opened a door Ethan didn't know was locked. When they reached the parking lot, Ethan turned to her. "Why did you leave your job here?" he asked quietly. Claire shrugged lightly, but her eyes betrayed her. "Because I couldn't stay in a place where I'd failed people," she said, and because it was easier to bury myself in work than face what I'd done. She paused, but meeting you again, hearing Lily's name, it shook something loose in me. Maybe I've been waiting for this too. He held her gaze, surprised by the warmth he felt, gratitude, respect, something gentler than either of them expected. I don't know what happens next, he said honestly. Claire smiled faintly. You don't have to know. Just start by telling your daughter the truth. Everything else will follow. He nodded. She turned to leave, but then hesitated, glancing back at him with a softness he had never seen in her. If you need anything, for Lily, or even for yourself, you can call me, she said, voice quiet but steady. I owe you both that. Ethan looked at the letter again, then at the woman who had brought it back to him after so many years. Thank you, Claire, he said, meaning it more deeply than she could know. She offered a small, earnest smile, one that didn't belong to the iron executives, but to the woman beneath. And then she walked away, leaving Ethan standing in the sunlight with the letter pressed to his heart, knowing that for the first time in years, he wasn't carrying the weight alone.